that better? Can you hear me out there? Thank you. So it's great to be here with you in Kingston today. And as Elizabeth said, I'm Judy Needham, and I recently moved. So home for me is in West Kelowna, British Columbia. And although I'm here with you today in my role as chair of the Patient Representative Committee of the Canadian Cancer Trials Group, or CPPG, similar to all of us, I wear a few other hats. And I think that my grandma hat gives me the most powerful responsibility, head of the family. Well, at least my children humor me and let me think that. But I was introduced to the cancer world in the early 2000s with my breast cancer diagnosis, which inspired me to seek early retirement from my corporate life and career and to spend more time with my family. And to embark on some volunteer work with the desire to give back to a system that gave me so much in extending my life. So I'm excited to share a bit about what I've learned. And so now I'm going to put on my patient partner hat. This is a snapshot of organizations that I'm currently engaged with provincially, nationally, and internationally, in addition to the Canadian Cancer Trials Group. So today I want to start our discussion with a mile-high view of the drug development process in Canada. I know you've heard a lot about this already, so I'm going to just really skim through it from a patient perspective. And I want to take a look at patient-centered research and what that means. Then a bit about why involve patients as partners in research. And finally, I want to zoom in and touch on patient engagement in the clinical trials portion of the research spectrum that we've just spent a lot of time talking about. So I'm delighted to follow this discussion. So first of all, what is patient engagement in research? Well, it's twofold. Number one, patients as participants, those individuals who are participating in the clinical trials that we heard about. But secondly, patients as partners in determining, developing, and delivering the research questions, ensuring patient feasibility, and as we just discussed, outcomes that matter to patients. So my presentation today is going to focus on the latter, patients as partners. So as Dr. Dancy explained to us, new drugs start out with a scientist in a laboratory developing a substance, either chemical or biological, that could be used to treat a specific disease or condition. Translational research then evaluates combinations that can be developed to achieve a desired treatment effect. The compound is refined and tested in labs and animal models to determine doses, side effects, and safety before moving into people. Why involve patients as partners in this clinical research? Well, partnering with patients at this early stage of research helps to align preclinical research with patients' priorities. And as a follow-up to the discussion we've just had, I think this is so important that right from the get-go, when those questions are being formed, that the patient's priorities and needs are being taken into consideration. To better understand the real-life implications of research, and to improve study quality and efficiency through patient input, and to include the patient perspective in review panels for grants and funding, have patients being members of those panels and helping to make those decisions. And again, preclinical is non-clinical research performed in vitro test tubes, petri dishes, etc., or in vivo in mice, etc. And again, we've learned in Dr. Dancy's presentation that clinical trials explore whether new treatments, medications, and perhaps diagnostic techniques are safe and effective in people. So I won't spend a lot of time on the phases of clinical trials. But again, why involve patients as partners in clinical research? Again, we want to align clinical trial research with what's important to us as patients. And in addition to the scientific question or endpoint, patient partners identify endpoints that are important to a patient's quality of life I think that's our most important role in partnering with the research community. We want to identify barriers to patients in the trial designs themselves, and we want to assist with the development of trial documents and patient documents. We've learned from Valerie and Dr. Barry that CADIS, the Canadian Agencies for Drug and Technologies in Health, and PCODR is responsible for providing healthcare decision makers with objective evidence to help make informed decisions about the optimal use of drugs, and that Health Canada will weigh the evidence and approve the new treatment or device for use in Canada. And then provincial health authorities will also decide whether the new treatment is eligible for being refunded in their province. And finally, there's a new drug available for patients. So I want to take a closer look or zoom in on patient engagement in cancer clinical trials, that part of that spectrum that we just looked at. And once again, I'm going to use our Canadian Cancer Trials Group as an example. So I'm not going to go through all the detail here, but what I want to highlight, and we've already mentioned this, is that Dr. Joe Pater has established this group and program in 1980, and growing it quickly with Dr. Elizabeth Eisenhower introducing the investigational new drug program in 1982. First patient partners were engaged in the organization around 2008. And I became a member of the Breast Disease Site Committee in 2012 and accepted the chair position in 2014. So although I was not a student at Queen's, I feel like an honorary or an adopted member through the incredible mentoring and guidance that I've received from Joe and Elizabeth while building the patient engagement program that we have now. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, as Dr. Dancy went through an overview of who the Canadian Cancer Trials Group, or CCTG, is, being a cooperative academic oncology group headquartered here out of Queen's University, here in Kingston, Ontario. So thank you, Kingston, for sharing CCTG with the rest of us across Canada. You are internationally recognized for housing this institution that finds treatments that give people in Canada, and as a matter of fact around the world, with cancer, longer and better quality of lives. And I'll add to her description that this pan-Canadian collaborative network of researchers, physicians, scientists, and statisticians also includes patient partners, which is what I'm here to talk to you about today. So not to burden you with organizational structures, however, what does this network of scientists, researchers, and oncologists, patient partners look like? So looking at the first column that's headed scientific committees, there are 11 scientific cancer disease sites, including brain, breast, GI, GU, gynae, hematology, head and neck, lung, melanoma, sarcoma, and supportive care, and an investigational new drug committee. Research ideas from preclinical research, that first part of the spectrum, that may become new clinical trials, originate from scientists and researchers within these committees. In addition to those scientific committees, we see a quality of life, economic analysis, and correlative biology banking committee. The people icons indicate where patient representatives are also members of each of these scientific committees. They attend all committee meetings and are included in discussions about new trial proposals. The scientific members weigh in on the science and the scientific questions that the trial is being designed to answer, and the patient representatives weigh in on the trial design through a patient lens to help ensure it isn't too cumbersome for patients. They also ensure the trial includes endpoints that are important to a patient and improving quality of life, the discussion we just had. So our patient representatives don't just attend a meeting. They have an active role a collaborative role with the researchers to provide input into that trial being formulated in these early stages. And we provide them with some tools and training to assist in doing this. The middle column shows the group's oversight committees. The clinical trials committee is where new ideas that are now new trial proposals are evaluated and scored by a scientific team. And once again, patient representatives. I sit on that committee and evaluate and score the new proposals for a trial the same way as all of the scientific members on that trial do. The Data Safety Monitoring Committee monitors all of the clinical trials while they're being conducted to assure there are no issues with safety. And we have 2 patient representatives on this committee as well. Also have membership on the Strategic Executive Advisory Committee that provides overarching and strategic advice for the director, Dr. Janet Dancy, of the organization, ensuring that the patient is always at the heart of all of the strategic direction and decisions. It's important to note that collectively, all of these patient representatives form the Patient Representative Committee. We also have our own strategic objectives that support the group and meet regularly as a committee. Patient representatives are recruited to the organization for a once renewable 3-year term, so potentially 6 years. So we are truly part of the scientific teams and the work that happens. Lastly, on this, it is important. This structure totals over 2,100, and Joe, that may be an outdated number now, I'm not sure, but over 2,100 scientists, researchers, oncologists, surgeons, patient representatives, etc., from across Canada. And it involves over 85 cancer centers running our trials from across Canada. All of this is supported. At the hub of this is the Central Operations and Statistics Center, a little group of people, but a mighty, mighty group here at Queen's University. So the previous slide showed you how our patient reps are spread throughout our committees. I just wanted to show you a snapshot of what our patient representatives look like across Canada. We are a strong pan-Canadian patient voice. We are generally around 22 people. However, we are currently just working on filling a couple of vacancies in some of those disease sites that I showed you. So I've showed you how the patient representatives interact with the investigators on their committees. Now I'd like to show you how they interact with each clinical trial that is designed and executed. The chevrons along the middle of this slide represent the steps in the life cycle of a clinical trial, from the time that it's an idea in a scientist's head through that new proposal being written, going through the approval process, protocol and consent documents developed and written, and then the trial sent out to our participating centers across Canada, cancer centers, hospitals, clinical trial units, where patients can be enrolled. The trial closes, data is evaluated, and the results of the trial is published. And if successful, perhaps result in a new drug recommendation for Health Canada to consider. The light green boxes that I have around the chevrons represent each touch point where every trial is reviewed by and has input from patients. We talked about new concepts being developed into trials, being approved and funded. When protocols, I think Janet Dancy referred to it as a manual. I like to think of it as a recipe that cancer centers must follow in administering trials to patients. Our patient representatives play a part in development of that protocol. Once again, walking through the instructions in a patient's shoes to ensure that there aren't any encumbrances there for patients. When the trial closes, the results are published in medical journals, and our patient representatives play a role in sharing this information with stakeholders other than the medical community. Again, it's a complicated world. We just heard a lot of discussion from the panel. So we do provide all of our patient reps with training, and however, the expectation is not that they should be the scientists at the table, that they should understand the science. It's more to understand the patient portion of the trial. So I want to give you some examples now before I close of the benefits from patient engagement. The engagement has increased patients who participate in trials, or patients who have the illnesses benefits. We've created a plain language patient summary that goes out to every cancer center to help patients with their decision making. We even had one patient representative who influenced a new trial in the pipeline. It was a phase 2 study of high dose weekly whatever that is, in the treatment of relapsed multiple myeloma. So it was great to see that happen as a result of a suggestion from a patient. We've influenced trials opening internationally. CO21 was an exercise trial, and we collectively as a patient group appealed to the UK, who opened the challenge trial there in that country. We've influenced continued drug supply. We had a trial where there was a company who was pulling the drug supply, and our patient appeal was successful in having them continue that drug supply. We talked this morning a little bit about awareness. I think there needs to be so much work done in the increasing awareness area. One of our patient reps worked with Ovarian Cancer Canada to do a survey of their registries of patients with Ovarian Cancer Canada, and it resulted in a huge increase in knowledge in that patient population of clinical trials. We have assisted in additional funding. I don't expect anybody to read this slide, but you know, if there's any researchers in the room, you may have been involved in applying for CIHR grants. Most funders, including CIHR, now have an expectation of patient engagement in grant application, and CCTG successful trial grant applications have increased substantially over the past 5 years, and we qualitatively know that patient engagement here has contributed to that success. I now have just a couple of quotes from some of the patient representatives on our group. How am I doing for time? Am I okay? I'm okay. So this is a quote from one of our patient reps. One example that stands out for me, and because it involved collaboration amongst 3 reps, is the inclusion of patient-centered endpoints in a US trial that we were launching in Canada. And it was funded by a cooperative group from the United States. She said Marg and David had recommended that these patient-centered endpoints be included, but the group was reluctant to provide extra funds for this. To address this, I co-delivered a presentation at their November 2021 virtual meeting, in which several points of input from the other 2 reps and myself were provided and received very well. That trial is now running with quality of life, patient-centered endpoints as a result of the work that these patient reps did. Here's another quote. I delivered a talk at an OI, Ontario Institute of Cancer Research town hall. The agenda was why we're here, and it was meant to inspire staff and researchers, especially those who aren't clinicians and may not understand what a cancer patient goes through. This inspired formation of a research agenda that benefits patients, not just with length of life, but with quality of life. And Carol goes on to say, my story is one with severely reduced quality of life. I provide input to researchers on my committee with their early trial design. This anticipation of patient views of the trial enables better planning for increased patient enrollment. I comment on whether I think I would be willing to enroll in a particular trial design. My input is used to further design on the proposals well before they are in a written draft form. For example, sometimes the researchers will agree that they need to add more sites or countries to enroll the necessary number of patients. This is my last little example. I think one very impactful thing that we do as a patient rep team is to have a vote at the CTC. The Clinical Trials Committee is where new proposals are scored and approved for funding. I know that the researchers on my committee are very aware of our vote, and they now, in recent years, proactively make trials more patient-friendly and are inclusive of those patient-centered outcomes. So just stepping outside of the Canadian Cancer Trials Group, we know that there are many, many effective patient engagement and research initiatives happening throughout Canada. The Canadian Cancer Society has stepped up to sponsoring a community of practice for leaders in patient engagement in research throughout Canada. And I've had the pleasure of being one of the founders of this community. As of early this week, we have 54 members representing 35 organizations across Canada, including academic research organizations, provincial health authorities, patient advocacy groups, research sponsors, governments, including CHR, and industry. We've had 4 meetings in 2022 and consisting of keynote speakers from these organizations, including CHR, SCORE. And on a last closing note, Canada has very much become a leader in patient engagement and research, with other countries from around the world now seeking out some of our best practices. So I'd like to just put a big shout out to people like Joe and Elizabeth, who were leaders here with this initiative back in 2008 and have really supported and believe in patient-centered research. We've heard so much about that today. More through partnership. Thank you very much.